All right, perfect. Well, then let me start over again. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you, wherever you're based right now. My name is Gerald. I'm co-founder of The Urban Future, and I really want to welcome you warmly to the premiere of the Sofa Session series. It was about 2 months ago that this year's Urban Future event should have been taken place in Lisbon after some 16 months of work. And I don't know if that ever happened to you, that you had to cancel an invitation, an event, or a dinner party or something like that. But when we let more than 2,000 people from around the world know that the Urban Future is not going to happen, well, I think it's fair to say our mailboxes were quite busy in those weeks. But what was really most striking was the fact that we received so many emails from people sharing with us how sorry they were that they were not able to come and that they couldn't meet with all the interesting people, and actually how much they needed this place to exchange experience and get insight for their work. And that's actually the reason why we now introduced this series of events to share with all of you what's most relevant to CityChangers. Whether it's the job landscape in sustainability, or whether it's how to bring a vision to life, or today's session on how to mobilize others when it comes to driving change. So without any further delay, let me hand over to Miriam and to our great guests from 3 different countries. And Miriam, you will be the host of today's session. The floor is yours.
Hello, CityChangers. It's so exciting to have the pleasure and the privilege to moderate this very first sofa session in the absence of us all being able to gather together in person. It's going to be a packed 60 minutes whistle-stop tour through the topic of how to mobilize, how to get people on board with your projects. And I'm just looking at the participants rushing into the room at the moment. We've got 125 people from all around the world, which is just incredible. Look at that. Look at that. We've got people from Canada and the States, down in South America. We've got people from all over Europe, even down towards the tip of South Africa, right down then into Australia. It is absolutely extraordinary how people just are able to gather in this way. And it's such a privilege to be able to bring you all together on behalf of Urban Future and the Urban Future Global Conference in this way. As Gerald said, we've got the most amazing lineup for you today with 3 speakers. So I'm coming to you today from Malaga, from the south of Spain, which is very exciting. And as I said, we've got people from so many different places. So welcome to you all. I want to start by just telling you a little bit about the platform we're using very quickly for those of you 4. You have some functions that I just want to point out really, really quickly. So have a look at your menu bar, which should be at the bottom of your screen. You've got something called reactions. So if you want to kind of give the speaker some encouragement that what you've said is brilliant, you can give them a thumbs up. You can also give them a little round of applause if you think that that's an absolutely fantastic thing they've done. So use that to encourage them to feel like you're getting involved. If at any point you have any questions or you need help with anything, you can use the chat bar. So you've got a chat function. Lots of people starting to chat already. You can put your questions in there as we go along. And also in the participants bar, you will see that you have an option to raise your hand. So if you need help, or if you want to, in the Q&As, ask a question, just pop that up, raise that hand, and then one of the moderators, one of the hosts will come to you. And if we can get to your question, then we will do that. So any problems, try and, get the help you need, but I don't want to delay our session because we've got so much to get through. We're going to use some polls. So we're going to ask you some questions. So we need you to be ready to get involved. We're going to maybe even ask you to write some things down, to hop into a breakout room, to have some screen serendipity and meet some people from this session. But the first thing I'd like you all to do is, if possible, and you've got one nearby, grab a piece of paper, grab a bit of paper and a pen. Okay, quick, grab one. Because what I want you to start off by doing is thinking for yourself, if you could bring about a change in your area, in your city, if you could do one thing like make a pond swimmable, if you could do something for the children of your region, if you wanted to do something around recycling, or perhaps to do with a green space, whatever it might be, just take 10 seconds to write down what it is that you would like to trigger to change in your city or your town or your community in just 3 words, just really quickly in 3 words. So this is mine. As I said, I'm in the south of Spain. It's not always the cleanest part of the world. People don't always manage their litter very well. So mine is this: better rubbish disposal. I want to know how I can play a part, little old me down here in Malaga, to help people to care a bit more about their environment, to dispose of their rubbish, their litter more effectively. So write down those 3 things. Don't show us yet. We're going to save that for a little secret moment at the end. Write down those 3 things. Because what I'm going to do now, without any further ado, is I want to get straight into today's session. So how to mobilize, with 3 incredible guest speakers. We have Erion Veliaj, we have Maria Vassilakou, and we have Jennifer Keesmaat from some incredible cities with some incredible stories. So very first, I'm going to turn immediately to Erion. Erion Veliaj is the mayor of Tirana in Albania. And Erion has had some extraordinary successes, managed to achieve some incredible things to change his environment and his city. And Erion has some very clear ideas about the best way to do that, how to engage with his communities, how to find allies, how to take the small steps that end up making the biggest difference. So Erion, I'm going to put your beautiful city in my background, and I'm going to come straight to you, and I'm going to ask you, please, could you take 3 or 4 minutes to share with us some of your inspiring stories about mobilization? Over to Erion Veliaj.
Thank you so much, Miriam. You know, in this line of work, and whether you work in Tirana or whether you're in Vienna or Toronto or wherever the audience is coming from, you have sort of this list of experts. And one of the things the experts say, if you're in politics or if you're a city manager, is that you should really take care of voters and taxpayers. And it makes perfect sense, right? This is the people that give you the mandate, and this is the people also that give you the money to do things. But the question is the city only constituted by voters and taxpayers? What happens if you're a child? What happens if you're a teenager? What happens if you're someone under 18? What happens if you were a visitor? So we started to change a bit the thinking, because we were realizing that looking at people's voting patterns and their calcified positions was taking a lot of time. And people believe in dogma, and people believe in a voting record, party affiliations, stories from the past. And we said, what if we change the rhetoric? What if for some of the most important and difficult decisions in our party, inhabit, what if we non-taxpayers and non-voters are children? In my view, children are an indicator species. So if you see children, can you hear me okay? If you see children in the public realm, then you realize that the place is safe, and you realize that the place believes in a future, and you realize it's family oriented. So when we started our first experimentations, we said, what if we organize a car-free day for kids only? And of course, the parents would get completely upset. They would go home, they'd curse the mayor, and then kids would come back, and kids would say, well, you know, maybe you had a difficult time going around the block in the downtown area, but we had so much fun. It was the first time I could use that bike you bought me from 3 years ago. It was the first time I could actually fly a kite through the city. It was the first time we could play tag downtown. So it started a series of mobilizations by getting children to be advocates of change. Now, children are very important also for another reason. People are suspicious of politicians. So maybe they hear Maria in Vienna, and they say, but she's green. Of course, she's going to have us all on bikes. She's supposed to, because she represents these green ideas. But you cannot be suspicious of your own child, because if your child is having such a great time running around the city on a bike, on rollerblades, and is sharing that fun, it's very difficult to be suspicious of your own child like you are with politicians. So we started this series first of playgrounds to get kids really to claim their territory and moving away cars from small areas that were occupied through the years. And of course, in the beginning, like with every other change, no matter what you've written in that letter, that Miriam asked you to, you will always face a hysterical minority. And this hysterical minority exists everywhere. They exist in Kigali, they exist in Tokyo, of course they exist in Tirana and the rest of the Balkans. But the question you have to bear in mind is, who are the indicator species, and children are? Who is the silent majority? And these families and parents are the silent majority who will back you up once you pick up momentum. Then after we started building these playgrounds, we realized that crime started going down. It's really difficult to get away with a flat screen TV from a flat that you have stolen. If in front of the flat, everybody's playing, it's 24/7 open, all the grannies are there, all the granddads are playing domino. So by inducing life in the public sphere, which were previously occupied by cars, then you are also contributing to public safety. And we realized that playgrounds was the best investment on public safety compared to spending more on the police force or equipment or cameras. I think a granny knitting and watching her grandchildren play are the best high definition camera for safety anyone can have in any of our cities. But then we said, look, gaining public space is great, but what about this space right here, which is 10 centimeters and is the most difficult space and piece of infrastructure to change? How can we do that? And again, kids were fantastic. We decided to play a game in which every child in Tirana plants a tree for their birthday. And once it started going, it wouldn't stop. So we on average plant over 100,000 trees a day, and we call them birthday trees. So it's not true that poor cities cannot afford this stuff. We just need to figure out a way. Let's say if a rich city of Vienna or Berlin or Toronto simply just buys the trees, a poor city in the Balkans needs to get 100,000 families to contribute with one tree. And of course, you don't want to be the uncool kid in the class who's the only one who hasn't planted the tree, because then you have peer pressure, which is a very positive peer pressure. Then we started thinking, when I was a child, Albania was almost starving. It was the North Korea of Europe. And then in 30 years, our number one problem is obesity, where kids are just dosing themselves with carbonated drinks, sugar drinks, and French fries. And we said, how it has changed in 30 years. So then we said, telling adults how to eat and be healthy is probably difficult, but changing our diets in kindergartens, in nurseries, and then have these kids inject this healthy lifestyle. So in the food they eat, in the activity they get, opening schools in the afternoons to work 24/7 as gyms and courtyards where kids can play safely. It brought a lot of changes to this 10 centimeters. And once these unusual advocates who are not paying any taxes and who are not voting are getting the whole city geared up to either plant trees or to are free, I think we often overlook some of these very unusual, uncommon. I think looking for allies out of the ordinary is number one. Number two is always keep in mind what's a loud minority, what's a hysterical minority, and what is a silent majority. And number three, what money cannot buy, some good ideas surely can make up for.
I mean, wow, Erion, we talk about inspiration and a whistle-stop tour through some of the initiatives that you've put in place. I'm just watching some of the chat and people are saying, you know, loving the CCTV grannies and brilliant idea on the birthday trees. I mean, it's so inspiring. And I'd never heard that phrase before, that silent majority. And I think that's such a clever place to start. But I did have one question about using sort of children as your silent majority, as it were, getting children on board. Were the media, this comes from Gerald, this question, but were the media ever suspicious of you trying to use children to bring about change?
No, absolutely. And most of the media owners, and this is true for Albania, for Kosovo, Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia, Greece probably, are also large developers. So they have a lot of interest in the city keeping the way it was going. So I'm a socialist. I believe in progressive tax. If you're a large developer, it's going to be you who's going to have to carry the burden and not the granny to pay for infrastructure. So I'm very clear on this on day one, and we already ran through those battles also in the Constitutional Court. So, and of course, if you have media so involved in other business, and media is just one of the many businesses, then of course you get hurt. But I think by having your message independent, by going mostly on socials, but working, like I said, in every classroom, in every school to build this consensus, and by not being prone to any chantage or backstabbing or racketeering that is very traditional in this part of the world, you gain yourself independence. And you can afford to say, I don't care where 2 or 3 media outlets owned by these developers say, as long as I have a coalition in these, and these kids are the best media ever. You know, what happens is you can look at whatever advertisement, but I think still the best way of communication is a human being looking at a human being and saying, I had so much fun today in the city. I wish we had it car-free every day, at least downtown or certain areas. So once it's genuine, even though the largest sinister media coalition to stop you from changing the city is futile.
Erion, we're getting lots and lots of questions through now. And as I said, this was going to be a whistle-stop tour because we only have our 60 minutes to glean as much as we can. But can you just give us one example, one practical example of a way that you involved the children? Either how did you communicate with them? How did you get their feedback? How did you involve them in like the design or the implementation process? Just tell us one really concrete thing that someone else could do if they want to involve children in their mobilizing.
I think one of the easiest things that any mayor can do, no matter where they are and how much money they have, is we created a kids council. So just like we have a city council with adults, elected adults, we get a kids council. So every school mandates one member to come and sit with the mayor and look at the budget and look at what we can do, and also listen to them and some of their initiatives. And the second thing that one can do, I spend 1 hour every day with a class of kids coming to see the mayor. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, but you can afford 1 hour. So I think by now I must have personally met thousands of kids and teenagers in these 5 years. So my team knows this is a very holy time for me. It will never be replaced by any meeting or any urgency. I will spend this 1 hour, and they ask anything like, how do you bury people? Where does the water come? You know, how deep are the roots of a tree? How do you castrate the stray dogs? But it doesn't matter. Whatever the question is, it creates a sense of bonding, and they say, look, it's my city too, because then they start thinking of becoming a future mayor or become a future city manager. And once they have mental roots in the city, it's much easier to then put physical roots like planting trees.
I mean, Erion, absolutely inspirational, and your passion speaks volumes. I'm going to have to sadly stop you, even though I think we could talk to you just for the full hour. But we do want to get on and hear some other thoughts. But I know people are really inspired by what you've started to share. If you want to, as well as keeping an ear open to what Maria's going to say next, but if you want to jump on the chat function and maybe type some really brief replies to some of the other questions that have started coming through so we don't lose that amazing insight, then that would be absolutely incredible. But thank you for sharing. And now, CityChangers, all 149 of you who are on this incredible sofa session, I'm going to launch the very first poll. So please, fingers on your buzzers. Could you please select just one answer? But if you are going to ask the best way, or think about the best way for you personally, how are you going to mobilize? Which of these 3 options are you going to pick? Better safe than sorry, start with small changes, or dare and go all in, create disruptions, or actually, do you know what? I just find the idea of mobilizing people so daunting. I don't know how to start. So 10 seconds, fingers on buzzers, pop your answers in there. Don't be shy. We've had 51% of you have voted. That's it. And Erion's gonna start getting on that chat. Lots going on. This isn't like any other webinar I think you'll have been to. I think we're gonna hopefully blow through this and fill us with as much inspiration as we can. So another couple of seconds just to put your votes in there. That's fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. So we've got, this is cool. See, I'm looking at the answers as they come in. All pretty clear. that most people feel the same. So I'm going to end it now. So if you haven't voted, I'm sorry you don't get your voice this time. Although, as Erion would say, listening is the first step to mobilization, which I definitely agree with. So these are the results of the poll. So clear winner at 65% of you who think that, okay, let's just take these small steps, let's try things, let's get some feedback. But 31% of you actually think, do you know what? Let's go all in, let's provoke some people, let's create some friction, you know, let's, sorry, there you go. Can you see that now? I forgot to press share. You can see it now. So 65% for safe and sorry, but 31% of you to dare and go all in, which is the most fantastic segue I think I could possibly have asked for to introduce our next speaker. Because she is a pretty incredible woman. She is the former vice mayor of Vienna in Austria. Her name is Maria Vassilakou, and I'm absolutely delighted to have her with us today because her approach has been somewhat different from the approach that in some ways Erion's taken. So we're going to hear a bit from the different side of that approach, because Maria has often mobilized in a way which has caused friction, which has created problems, hasn't always been met with positive responses, hasn't always been met with real allies and advocates for her projects. But she has some incredible stories about how she's got through that, how she's handled those difficult situations to ultimately bring about the changes that she was trying to create. So without further ado, the wonderful Maria Vassilakou.
Hello, everybody. Well, you wouldn't imagine that Erion and myself have not talked to each other before today, actually. But as you will see, the story that I have to tell corresponds at least at some parts with what Erion has been talking about. Now, the story that I want to share from Vienna is a story about daring and jumping in, and then finding yourself amidst huge controversy. But let me start first of all by saying what it was about and why we did it. Now, back in 2012, we decided to pedestrianize and introduce wide-scale traffic calming along Vienna's longest shopping street, which is called Maria-Hilfer-Straße. And the reason why we did it has a lot to do with what Erion has been talking about. Now, in my case, I wanted to introduce urban design in Vienna around the needs of children. Why? Because I believe that what we want for our children is actually what we want for ourselves as well, what we long for ourselves. We want our children to be able to grow up in a healthy environment, in a safe environment. We want them to be able to move around freely, to play. And I think that you have to provide exactly these very same qualities at the heart of the city. Now, Maria-Hilfer-Straße is not only a shopping street, it's actually a long street that connects two very, very dense boroughs in Vienna that have almost no playgrounds, almost no green spaces. So the overall idea was to create a new wonderful public space where people not only stroll and go shopping, but also thousands of families that live in the two adjoining boroughs will have a new space where they can go with their children to spend the afternoon and where the children can move around freely. And what was also very important was that we did not only want to pedestrianize the street itself, we also wanted to introduce wide-scale traffic calming also in the adjoining neighborhoods, because we knew if we just pedestrianize the street, but don't take any additional measures, this would mean that you would have all cars driving around in the adjoining streets, which is clearly something that we wanted to avoid. So once again, it was actually quite a large-scale traffic calming project. Now, besides opposition that was there, because of course not everybody needs to agree, that this is a good idea in the first place. As we all know in politics, we are every now and then also confronted with situations where the political game means that let's say the opposition would do anything they can to bring this project to a fall. And in our case, it has been the first coalition between Social Democrats and Greens in Vienna. I myself was a very, very new vice mayor. for the Green Party. So it was clear for me from the beginning, and I think for every one of us, that we would be facing very fierce opposition. But I have to be honest, it became so fierce and it became so critical that, yeah, I was actually surprised in the end about how fierce it was. Now, speaking about the silent majority and the loud minority, Machiavelli once said, whoever wants to change things will have fierce opposition from the people who fear disadvantages, but will have almost no support from the people who might benefit from it. And I think that the first thing you have to do when you go into mobilizing, especially in critical, in very controversial situations, is to address the people that are in favor of the project and to ask them to actively support you. Now, in our case, we went into the project by asking people about their needs. We introduced a long period of public consultation. We even placed tables on the street, and everybody who passed by could actually express their needs and also bring into their own ideas about the design of the street. Everything wonderful, but controversy would just grow and grow and grow. And there came a point where I had the feeling that everybody was on that street actually quarreling with each other. I mean, the scenes from Vienna, you can't imagine them, how it was back then. It was very, very, very emotional. So I took the decision that we will have a referendum. And that we will let the people decide themselves if they want to have the pedestrianization project, yes or no. But what we also did, and I think that this is also very important in such situations, was that we introduced a test phase. We said we're taking the cars out of the street. We're not going to do any construction work, but you will have the opportunity to experience the whole project and the difference that it makes for approximately 8 to 9 months. And then we will have a referendum, and people that live in the two adjoining districts can decide all by themselves if they want to have it redone or if they want to have it the way it was before. And what we also did, and I think that this was also, let's say, the turning point in this whole controversy, we visited 30,000 households. It's 30,000 households that live in these adjoining areas. So we knocked practically on every door. If they were against the project, we would just say, if you want to talk about it, we will stay here and talk with you. But if they say they are in favor, we ask them to support us actively. And what we also got was support by artists, by prominent people that live in the two adjoining boroughs, by university professors, by many people that also could access the media and could actually also talk loudly, let's put it this way, in favor of the project. In the end, I think also one last thing that was very extremely important for mobilization and turned actually the way people felt about the project, I think arts and culture is also very important. In our case, it was a group of people that came up spontaneously with the idea to do a flash mob on the street using Happy, the song, and dancing. They created a wonderful video in the middle of this street, which was clicked upon for more than 500,000 times. We had the referendum and we won. And so let me tell you, in the end, the three major takeaways that I have out of this is, I think that you have to let people experience the way things will change, and then ask if they are in favor or not. I think that it is very important to address the people directly, and if it is possible, whether you do it by addressing the children or whether you do it by knocking on every door, you have to spend time on site talking to thousands of people if it's an important and very controversial project, and you have to ask them to actively support you. And one last thing is, you should, of course, judge very carefully in the beginning if and how controversial the project is going to be. But once you enter it, then don't give up. You have to walk through the project. You have to do whatever it takes to have the job done, and you have to do it, because if you back down, then it's better that you should not have started it in the first place.
Maria, you are a force to be reckoned with, and that was incredibly insightful as to how you've managed it. And what I'd love to do is, if anyone in the participants in the audience has got a question that you'd actually like to ask live, so on your video or on your chat, can you go to your participants button and raise your hand, and we'll get to you in a sec. And while you're thinking about a question, which I'd love to, Maria, just from me, how personally did you manage in the face of adversity and resistance? How did you keep going? How did you have the courage not to give up?
I think it was because for one thing, I had a very clear vision of how wonderful it would get once we had gone through controversy. And I mean, you have shown the pictures. It is really one of the most beautiful places in Vienna right now. And I just wanted to be able to experience this kind of change and drive this kind of change. But the second thing, of course, is that there were so many people that were also in favor of the project, and they strengthened me so much.
Very inspiring. And I have a question from Gunther Grammel, and forgive me if I've said that wrong, Gunther, but I think that's roughly right. I'm just going to unmute you. So question incoming from Gunther.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'm Günther from Austria, currently living in Croatia. Question to Maria, please. What do you think from your experiences? Do you believe as we are dealing with a certain technology, a solar power compactor, which we are focusing on smart waste recyclable collection on public places? So what does it mean again? So as I know Vienna very well, have also an apartment here close to beautiful Schönbrunn. It's a trash bin, has on top of it a solar panel, and inside is sort of a telephone, let's say, in an on-site compactor. And so when it's full, it notifies the city authorities, the communal department, and says, please pick me up, I'm ready, I'm full, please pick me up. What does it mean? It means that the communal department, utility companies, doesn't have to drive nonsensely around the city, either to watch the public trash bins in Vienna if they're full or not full. So there are around 15,000 baskets hanging all around, most of them too many. And I would like to focus to decrease the number of public trash bins in order to get down with the visual pollutions, you know? So many.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because we're on quite a tight time scale.
Okay.
Is there a specific question that you want to ask Maria about this?
Yes. Does she believe that this could work in the city of Vienna, these solar-powered compacting machines?
Perfect.
So,
thank you, Gunther. I really appreciate your question.
Okay.
Maria.
Well, I have to be honest, I would have to see it first in order to tell you if it would work or not. Because as you mentioned yourself as well, it has pretty much to do with the size of such devices and with the impact that they would have, you know, within the overall urban design. But generally, of course, it sounds like a good idea.
Fabulous. Well, Maria, thank you so much. And as somebody who's handled resistance and still come through with a beaming smile and a lot of fight, it's incredibly inspirational to hear from you on this. So again, if you've got some questions for Maria that you want to carry on asking, pop them into that chat bar, and Maria can give you some little text answers, and we can give you the transcript afterwards. So we're not going to lose any of this insight, but we want to keep this moving on and nice and pacey. And Jennifer was here, and oh no, you are there, Jennifer. Hello. Because next up, I'm very excited to be able to introduce Jennifer Keesmaat, who was the former chief city planner for Toronto in Canada, which is a glorious city. And Jennifer, I am going to ask you, in the same way that Erion and Maria have shared their stories about mobilization and how they've got people on board to achieve incredible things to change their cities, could you give us some insights, particularly around, you know, I guess how you build your campaigns, how you have created those changes in Toronto?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joining this conversation of city changers across the entire globe. And let me just say that I chose number 2 in the survey. And in part because in my experience, sometimes it's actually better, as Maria has explained, to have a bold vision and to lay the groundwork, find your allies, and to execute on that vision. And the amazing thing about doing so is that once you get to the other side of the change, invariably, that hostile minority that the mayor spoke about, they come on side. Because one of the things that has been clear to me over 20 years of practice is that there are people who can see change, there are people who can see the future, and there are people who can't. There are people who will fundamentally resist change. And what we need to do is equip them with as many tools as possible to be a part of the future vision, and that change that the city can be. We need to do everything that we can to bring them along. But if we allow that portion of the public to direct our city building, there will be no change. Change will not happen. So there's always going to be a certain level of conflict until people can actually see the future. That's invariable. And I just want to draw the parallel to what we're seeing around the world right now in light of Black Lives Matters. For so long, Black Lives Matters was seen as a fringe activist group. And many in our cities could not see that anti-Black racism was a real thing. They couldn't see it. And very sadly, as a result of George Floyd's death, so many people now can see what they couldn't see before. And I think there's a really powerful parallel in that in our city building. Sometimes people can't see it. And there needs to be an opportunity to figure out how that seeing can actually take place. What I'd like to do is just very quickly share my screen and pop up on the screen a framework for actually understanding the opportunity for advancing change, in a framework that I've used. And really, the first question is understanding what are the drivers for change. That's really the why. And we need to have a very clear understanding based in history, the arc of justice, the kind of cities that we're seeking to change, what the drivers for change are. And we need to actually build with the public an understanding of those drivers for change. Then we have to ask the question, what's the vision? What is it that we want to achieve, and work with the public to advance that vision? Then we need to really begin to understand the barriers to success, who our natural allies are, and what our sphere of influence is. I picked number 2 about radical change, in part because I've been prepared in my professional life to identify my allies, to figure out my own sphere of influence, and to push up against that sphere of influence in order to deliver change, to get right up to the boundaries. And I'll talk in just my last minute about what that might look like. And then, of course, you put a plan in place and you execute on that plan. You take that plan, but that plan has to have a very solid foundation. And in my experience, the most important work that we can do with the public is helping them really understand why change matters. And again, going back to what's happening right now in Black Lives Matters around the world, the driver for change has been very clearly articulated and is very clearly understood, I would argue, around the globe today. It wasn't 2 weeks ago, but the driver for change, police brutality, is understood in a way it was not understood just 2 weeks ago. And when the public understands the drivers for change, they can open their hearts and minds to a vision of a fundamentally different kind of future. So in the last minute, what I'll just like to say is that I've used this kind of framework in order to advance change in my city. The example I'll give specifically is the King Street pilot, which is a transit corridor in our city where the streetcars were moving slower than walking. We conducted data and analysis, so we built understanding. That's the driver for change. And we determined that whereas 15% of the people being moved in the corridor were being moved by cars, 64% of the corridor was allocated to cars. We built understanding around that problem, what it was we were trying to fix. And then we created a vision where the corridor became a highly efficient transportation corridor by getting the cars out of the way. And then we executed that plan. We figured out our natural allies. It turned out that the business leaders and business precincts who were seeing lost productivity as a result of people being stuck in traffic were our natural allies. So we brought them on board to advocate for a transit-oriented corridor. And then we created a plan and we moved straight to execution. Remember, I'm a number 2. Go straight to execution. Sometimes incremental change can actually take too long. Thank you.
I mean, once again, Jennifer, these are such inspiring examples of change that's been executed and through different means. And I think I find that very encouraging that we can all do things in our own way. And we have had a question through around getting started, because you've talked about vision and having a purpose and a clear solution to a problem. But how do you really begin that campaign to even start getting people on board? A practical idea for us.
This is a very critical question. What we did for the King Street pilot 2 years before we even talked to politicians, we started a campaign with the media, writing op-eds around international best practices for transforming corridors to be transit priority. So we began an education campaign. We brought in Jeanette Sadat-Khan from New York City to talk about how pilots can be a way into introducing change into cities. So we began a campaign that wasn't actually about King Street yet, but it was about the power of pilots and the opportunity to adapt and transform infrastructure to create a more livable and a more equitable city. And we started that well before we started talking about where we were going to apply the idea. So we tilled the soil in the public domain, in the hearts and minds of Torontonians, to build constituents that would both understand and be advocates for the idea once we brought it forward. That was really about the drivers for change and building the drivers for change within the city.
That's amazing. And I'm sure we're going to have some more questions. So again, please do keep those coming through on chat for all 3 of our speakers. And we've just had a really lovely comment actually, which from Gil, I think, from Gil Penalosa, who says, inspirational panel of people who have vision and guts and have done transformation. What they have done can be replicated anywhere. It's not a technical or financial issue, it's political often. Great ideas from each of them. And that this idea that this crisis has opened a window of opportunity. And, you know, it's not lost on any of us, I think, that we're talking about the topic of mobilization during a period of time where an awful lot of people have been mobilized to take action, particularly on the Black Lives Matter issue. And mobilization is ultimately about creating change. So our next poll, before we go into a breakout room session where you get the chance to have a little chat with some of your fellow participants, is all about change and creating change. So what do you think about this? What do you find is your biggest obstacle to driving change? Now, we've only given you a choice of 4 options here, because when we go into the breakout room, what I want you to do is talk about not only why maybe you chose the answer you're about to give, but also what's missing from this list. You know, what haven't we said here? What are your personal biggest obstacles to driving change? So yeah, pop some ideas on here. We're going to give this 30 seconds because we are really working you hard today, keeping you on your toes. And we are then going to go into the breakout room. So while you're completing the poll, let me just explain. We have randomly allocated you into groups of about 4 people, and you're going to go off into your own little separate magical Zoom room, and you're going to find yourself with these people. And it's lovely, isn't it? Because in a real conference, you chat to the people sitting next to you, or you bump into someone at the coffee break, and you don't always get that in virtual environments. So, you know, I thought I'd call this screen serendipity, but I guess our American colleagues might want to call it, what can we call it? The webinar water cooler. Maybe our French friends could call it les voisins virtuels. Listen, you come up with your own name for this, but we're going to go with screen serendipity. But don't get sidetracked too much if you can help it. Give yourselves a quick introduction to each other. Say hi, get excited about meeting the people that you're about to meet. But do try and have a really quick discussion about personally the biggest obstacles to driving and creating change that you're finding. And then we're going to come back into the main room, and we're going to put some of those thoughts into the chat window, and I'm going to get all of our brilliant 3 speakers back on screen to kind of address some of those things and talk about ways that they have overcome some of these obstacles. So I'm ending this poll. I'm going to share the results so far, and again, a clear winner, that 71% of people think it's impossible, so impenetrable political structures, which kind of comes back to my earlier point, which is, you know, well, who am I just to create change? You know, it's all right for you, you know, mayor of this, city planner of that, you know, town crier here, vice president there. But what about the rest of us? So that's obviously an obstacle we see. Obviously, you know, lack of funding and money seems to be an issue, difficulty in finding those allies, people's own personal sense maybe of confidence and self-belief. But outside of these things, what do you find prevents you from being able to create change? So by the magic of the moderation, this is going to be fun, you're going to disappear, and then you're going to magically reappear in about 5 minutes time after you've had your chat. So moderators, could you please open the breakout rooms? People are gradually coming back in. That was fast, right? I'm sorry if we cut anyone off speaking, but let's wait for everyone to gather again. I feel a bit guilty. Apologies if you were in the middle of some very exciting theory about your obstacles. While we're waiting for everyone to gather, those of you who are back, can you just pop open the chat window and in 1 or 2 words, start typing in the obstacles that you've identified. So pop some of those obstacles in there. My group was awesome. I eavesdropped. So I just loitered in the background and eavesdropped, but they just got through all of their comments, I think, as we were closing the rooms. We're trying to keep you to time today. I know we could go on for a long time, but hopefully this is to whet your appetite. So those of you coming back in, please, could you pop into the chat window what you found? And sorry if someone didn't manage to get into a breakout room. I guess we're a little bit at the whim of some of this technology, but hopefully you didn't find yourself floating around in cyberspace somewhere. So yeah, pop some in that. Just from my group, let me share with you some of the ones that I heard. Siloed thinking. We had some comments about siloed thinking between departments. Had some comments about the requirement for training or skills upgrades, which often don't happen at the speed they need to. Had some comments about resources for sure, economic, financial, resources, and also people who feel like they don't have a say. We've got a few more coming in here. So lack of trust, greed, generalizing solutions, motivation, interest of political stakeholders. This is fantastic stuff. Maria and Erion and Jennifer, will you pop yourselves off mute again for a sec? And we're literally going to come to each of you once, just to have a very quick 30 or 20-second insight, please, on your comments to do with how to overcome some of these obstacles. So who are we going to start with? Let's have a look. My magic spinning wheel. Let's go for Erion. Okay. Pick one of the obstacles that you've heard or seen on the chat or come across yourself. How did you get over it? 20 seconds, go.
Just had this conversation in our breakout about bureaucratic hurdles, where you have a lot of technocrats who've been there forever and who sort of figure out why things cannot be done. And I think it's important for mayors or city managers to also get involved, not to become micromanagers, to keep to a deadline and to keep to a tough decision should overcome bureaucratic tendencies.
Absolutely. Great. So next we have Jennifer. 20 seconds. How have you overcome some of these obstacles that people are pointing out on the chat?
Well, I think the biggest thing is tenacity. One of the things I didn't mention is that it's never a straight line. Projects fail and they fail again and they fail again and they fail again, and you have to keep getting up off the ground. And I would love to tell you all of the stories of how when we were getting the King Street pilot up and running, how things went wrong, because things went wrong over and over and over again. And at the end of it, 18 months later, after we went to City Council, 18 months later, we had it completely up and running and we were evaluating it. It looked easy from the outside, but I can tell you, it was almost soul-sucking. It was so difficult, the amount of energy and momentum that we had to bring to every single conversation to overcome the resistance to change, particularly within the bureaucracy. And I was within the bureaucracy. And so I think, my biggest piece here is that it's super, super hard everywhere. You have to remember that, because when you get knocked down, you have to get up again and you have to try again and you have to be creative and go, that didn't work. What's another way that we can try and get this done?
Awesome tips. Right now, I've got to try and make this land on. Yes, Maria. So Maria, 20 seconds from you. How can we overcome some of these obstacles? A really practical tip from your experience. Have we lost Maria?
Mute.
Oh, Maria, you're on mute.
Yes, I'm muted now, right? So in many cases, administrations may be lacking personnel. or they may have the staff, but the staff may be lacking, you know, transfer know-how and the skills to do it. So I think that a very good way to go about it is to have experts come from other cities that have done it already. So you have to organize, you know, teaching your people how to do it, how to go about it.
Yeah.
And also a very good idea is also to go for visits. So to organize exchange, so your people can look into things in another city, perhaps spend some time there and learn on site how these things can be done.
Awesome ideas. And listen, everyone, I know we're out of time. If those of you who can stick with us for 2 more minutes, I'd love just to wrap this up without it feeling like a horrible rush towards the end. Do you remember at the beginning, we asked you to think about a project or something you wanted to change in your city and write down those 3 words? If you could hold them up, those of you who've got videos onto your screen, some of the team, the Urban Future team, are going to go to gallery view and we're going to screenshot your thoughts. So those of you who've managed to write something down, can you hold them up? And Urban Future team, just scroll through the gallery view. I think you should have about 20-ish people on each one. Can you just scroll through and take some screenshots? Because this is going to be hugely helpful for the future. I don't know if everyone's got their videos on, but let's grab a screenshot of what people have said. So the green cities banning cars, more rail lines, more blue lanes, streets for pedestrians. I mean, there's so much change. Look at that, be inspired by the change that people want to create in their towns and cities. And hopefully today, from what you've heard from all of our amazing speakers, you'll have a few tools and techniques that you can now go away and try and implement. And, you know, use some of the lessons and the learnings that you've got today, be inspired by something. To finish off, if you would humor me, we would like to just gather your thoughts about what has inspired you today, which tools you think you might want to use, what you are going to put into practice. So if you have an open browser screen window or your laptop or your phone, whatever it is, and you can just go to this website quickly, so www.menti.com, and you enter the code 770808. It's going to ask you to put in 3 words when you think about how you can most effectively mobilize in the future. So whether that's finding allies, whether that's being resilient, whether that's trying and trying again, whether that's whatever it might be, the 3 things that have really struck you from today's conversation, can you go to that website and chuck them in there? And we are going to create a word cloud as if by magic. She says, okie dokie, look at this. So stick in your words and let's see what people have been inspired by and what people are going to do and what action they're going to take. They're listening to the system. Oh, that's amazing. I find this quite emotional that people are taking this on board and really taking some of these things to heart and heeding the experiences from the amazing Erion, Maria and Jennifer. And as we're just finishing them off, this off, can I thank you 3 from the bottom of our hearts, from the Urban Future Global Conference team, from myself. My name's Miriam. I didn't even introduce myself at the beginning. It wasn't important, but it's been my honor and privilege to moderate this for you today. So pop in your words. We're going to distribute, I think, the materials. I haven't totally finalized with the team how we're going to do that, but I know the session's been recorded and live streamed on Facebook. I know that we can get chat transcripts. So I'm sure there will be some follow-up coming your way. I hope that you made some great connections with people in your breakout groups during your screen serendipity. And obviously we have some more sofa sessions coming up. So if you go to urban-future.org/sofa sessions, you can sign up for any of the upcoming sessions as well. And it would be great to see you on some of those. So let's just finish that off. And as we do that, I'm going to launch our very final poll over the top of this. If you would indulge me just to let us know how it went, because we want to improve. It was our first one of the series. We're always looking for feedback. So if you can give us your thoughts, then we'd greatly appreciate that. And thank you for your participation, for your questions, your insights, and most of all, thank you to Erion, Maria, and Jennifer for your time and your expertise and sharing your stories and your passion and your heart with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you all.